Okay, so it is time for us to discuss Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Book 6 in the Harry Potter series. If you're new to this series, I will leave a playlist linked up high and down below about all my Harry Potter videos. But basically, yesterday I put up a video talking about how much I love this book, going through from beginning to end, all these major scenes that are amazing and difficult and beautiful, and I love this book. And now we're doing the Doesn't Make Sense video, which is where I just kind of talk about all the little pieces that show up throughout the series that don't fit perfectly together. This is actually the video where I have the least amount to say in the Doesn't Make Sense video. It was a pretty clean book as far as I could tell. I do have a couple of small things that were just kind of like funny inconsistencies, or we don't have enough information for it to really make sense, but not a lot. So this will be a shorter video. Here we go. So like I said, most of these are going to be really minor things that aren't a big deal. It's just kind of fun to discuss the little stuff as well. So the first one is one that I guess it just doesn't make sense because we don't have enough information for it to make sense. And that's when Tom kills his kills his dad and grandparents. So when Tom is a teen, when Voldy is a teen, he goes back and visits his uncle Morphin. He wants to learn more about his parents. He finds out that his mom is an heir of Slytherin and she drugged Voldy's dad and forced him into a marriage, and then Tom was born in an unlucky way. Then his mom passed away and his muggle father lives on, still living with his parents, it seems, and also seemingly never having remarried. So Tom petrifies his uncle, goes down to his grandparents' house, kills his dad and his grandparents, goes back up to his uncle's house, modifies his uncle's memory, and then makes off. Then the Ministry tries to investigate these murders, and Morphin admits to having done the murders because his memory was modified, and he truly believes that he did it. And he spends the rest of his life living in Azkaban and is buried on Azkaban grounds because, you know, they think he did it. So like I said, this is more of an instance where we just don't have enough information on the magic around us for this to really make sense. First of all, Harry mentions to Dumbledore that Voldemort is underage at the point that he kills his dad, and Dumbledore confirms this, yes, he was underage. So we have another instance where, how does this underage trace work? The information we have so far is that the trace is on the person, not the wand, which is why in book 2, Harry got in trouble. He got accused and charged, or got a warning, for when Dobby performs a hover charm in front of muggles in Harry's house. But we also know that this monitoring that the Ministry does over minors isn't on the house, because Harry also gets in trouble when he performs a Patronus in front of his cousin, and Harry got in trouble. They knew it was Harry, so we know it's not on the house, we know it's not on the wand, we know it's on the person of the minor. And we also know that the Ministry has the ability to know instantly when this sort of thing happens, because when Dobby performed the hovering charm in book 2, Harry gets the letter giving him his warning instantly. So the fact that Voldy, when he's a teen, when he's underage, would go into a muggle home and perform an unforgivable curse on muggles, and that the Ministry didn't instantly know, instantly react, it wouldn't have been a warning, I'm sure, if it was a killing curse. And then he had time to go back up to his uncle's house and modify his uncle's memory and then get away before anyone was the wiser, is a bit odd. The only explanation I can think of is that maybe the Ministry wasn't monitoring minors when all this went down with Voldy as a teen. But even then, it seems like a little bit of an odd thing that nobody caught this, because even if minors weren't monitored at that point and they didn't know specifically that that magic was performed around a minor, even if that's true, they do know when magic is performed around a muggle. Morphin got in trouble for it in an earlier portion of the book, and several other wizards have gotten in trouble for performing magic around muggles. So the Ministry clearly has some way of detecting that muggles are aware of magic due to a wizard doing something in front of them. So it seems odd to me, if a killing curse was done or anything was done in front of these muggles, that they wouldn't react instantly, or at least quickly, and maybe notice that Tom's modifying his uncle's memory. Now, you could work your way around it and you could say, well, I guess they just took their time getting there. I guess they don't know that it's a killing curse. I guess they didn't have this this extra monitoring on minors. I guess Tom was just really fast and got out of there before somebody from the ministry showed up. Like, there's a lot of things that we could say that, well, maybe, but in my opinion, it would be cool if we have a rule in the world, and that's that minors are monitored, and then we break that rule. It would be cool to have a reason why that rule is broken, like this law was enacted in this year. So to me, it belongs on this list because with the information we're given, this doesn't make sense. But it would have been easy to solve just by giving us a throwaway line that gives us a little bit more information. It's not a big deal, but it is something that I look at and I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. The next thing is in regards to Veritaserum, because we get a little bit more information on it in book 7. There's the instance when we find out that Tom killed his parents and he was underage and he modified his uncle's memory. And when Harry points out all the different things that should have led to Tom being incriminated, Dumbledore mentions that because Morphin's memory was modified and because he happily confessed, there was no need for a trial, there was no need for Veritaserum, there was no need to try to dig deeper. They just accepted his word for it. I find it interesting that Dumbledore mentions Veritaserum as if that is something that they used, because the fandom has speculated a ton as to why Veritaserum wasn't used on the Death Eaters a few years later when they were accused of being followers of Valdi. And J.K. Rowling has explained that Veritaserum wouldn't work in a trial because you have to be given it unawares. And I find it interesting that in this scene, Dumbledore is speaking as if Veritaserum is used in trials. Then later on, Veritaserum is brought up again when he's talking about trying to get a memory from Slughorn. And he specifically says, I would be surprised if Slughorn didn't carry an antidote for Veritaserum with him at all times. Which is interesting because when we see Veritaserum taking effect in book 4, Dumbledore gives it to Barty Crouch Jr. and then he just starts spilling his guts. There's not really any sort of fight or any sort of indication that you can be aware that it has an effect on you. So if Dumbledore slipped Veritaserum in his drink, for instance, in Slughorn's drink, and then he drank it, I don't understand how the Veritaserum, does it work differently on Slughorn than it does Barty Crouch Jr. to where he is aware and so he can take an antidote? I'm really just curious how this works a lot more, because it genuinely doesn't make sense that the Death Eaters wouldn't be given Veritaserum on trial. Wanting them to confess the truth, it seems like Veritaserum is a pretty simple, minor way to make sure they do that, which is why J.K. Rowling said that it can't be used on trial because it has to be given unawares. But this seems to conflict that a little bit. Maybe this is another instance of we just don't have enough information and that's why it doesn't work fully, but I would love that more information. Oh, this next one's just kind of funny. It's just the little inconsistency that doesn't work, but it just kind of makes me laugh. Okay, so the first sentence in chapter 13, this is a narrative chunk. This isn't Harry talking or someone who might be misinformed. This is the book telling us facts. It says, Katie was removed from St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries the following day. A little bit later in the next chapter, again, it's a narrative chunk that's telling this. No one that could be misinformed. The same source says, it's talking about Katie, says, she had still not returned from St. Mungo's. So that's just a little inconsistency that made me laugh. Not a big deal, but I liked it. Next thing is Felix Felicis. I don't know how to say it. I said this in my review video, but it makes me laugh how frustrated people get that I don't listen to the audiobook, so I don't know how to pronounce every single thing in the series. But I mean, I just like physically reading the books. Anyway, it says that Felix Felicis takes 6 months to brew. And if we look at our timeline, Harry and Dumbledore show up about a month before term starts. And Slughorn is on the run, changing houses constantly, staying at different muggles' homes, and only taking a little bit of stuff with him as he goes. Then we start term, and Slughorn's very first lesson has this potion in it, which of course is not 6 months gap. Now, one could argue that Slughorn just kept it with him for his own luck because he's trying to evade the Death Eaters, so it makes sense that he wants some on him. Here's the problem though. That would absolutely make sense if he had a vial of it, because Slughorn tells us that you can only take this potion sparingly, otherwise you will have side effects. He says he's only taken it 2 times in his life, and he cautions the kids, this is not something that you can take frequently at all. So if Slughorn was on the run from the Death Eaters trying to evade them, and he had a vial of it with him, so that if he were being pursued by the Death Eaters, if they walked into his home, etc., he could pull it out of his pocket, take a quick swig, and be out of there. That makes perfect sense. But having an entire cauldron full that he's trying to transport with him from house to house, it doesn't make sense because there's no reason for it. Even if the cauldron full can just be vanished away and then reappeared. I don't know if there's some sort of stock. I don't know where things go when things are vanished away in this world. But even if it would be easy for him to transport an entire cauldron full, there would literally be no reason for him to transport an entire cauldron full. It would only make sense for him to get a vial of it to carry on his person close to him and then vanish away the rest of the cauldron, because the whole cauldron would be entirely useless to him because he can't even drink that much of the potion in his lifetime without having severe side effects. And he specifically says that he's only had it twice, so we know that he's not just drinking it every day and dealing with the side effects. And if he were doing that, we would see the side effects on him because they're very plain. So there's literally no reason that approximately 4 or 5 months before he even agrees to take the teaching position, there's no reason that he would just have a whole cauldron full of these brewing for funsies. A vial? Yes. A cauldron? Nah. Okay, only one more. Last thing. So we're at the cave with Harry and Dumbledore. Harry and Dumbledore decide that they want to go seek out the Horcrux. They leave Hogwarts, go down to Hogsmeade, see Rosmerita, yeah, that's how you say her name, Rosmerita, to show that they're gone. They want to be seen in Hogsmeade. Apparate to where the cave is, and then for whatever reason, they can't apparate to the cave, I assume because there's some sort of magical protection around it that keeps people from being able to apparate there. That makes sense. So they have to traverse these boulders and this treacherous landscape that Dumbledore specifically points out would not be something that most able-bodied people could do without the help of magic. Then, once they get through all the boulders, then they have to swim across this water so that they can get to the cave. So, like, it's a bit of a journey to get to the cave. Then they do everything in the cave, which very much weakens Dumbledore. He's barely able to speak. He slurs and mumbles everything that he says, can barely get full sentences out. He can barely walk, and he's leaning heavily on Harry to get anywhere within the cave. And then the chapter ends. Next chapter, we start with Harry heaving Dumbledore over the last boulder so that they can apparate back into Hogsmeade so that they can walk back up to the castle. There is a massive gap in time that's left out that doesn't make sense. I don't know if you've ever tried to drag somebody through water that is not helping you swim, that's basically dead weight, which is what Dumbledore was at this point. He was essentially dead weight on the land. There's no way he could swim. And it's clear that there's some sort of protection that keeps them from being able to use magic to get through this. Because if there were some way for them to use magic to get through it, Dumbledore wouldn't have asked Harry to swim through the icy water on their way in. Dumbledore made them traverse the landscape and swim through water. So obviously, you couldn't have used magic to get through it. And somehow, Harry, who had to drag Dumbledore out of the cave, also managed to get him through the water again and through that rocky landscape again without magic and without Dumbledore's help, and I just don't believe it. J.K. Rowling just skipped that entire scene of how Harry got Dumbledore out of there without killing them both, and I don't see how he did it. I would have at least liked a scene acknowledging that it was done instead of just skipping over it and like hoping readers don't remember how hard it was for them to get to the cave, and so like we just accept that they're back now. Anyway, that's all I have for this Doesn't Make Sense video. Like I said, this book, I just really didn't see very many things at all that didn't make sense. Almost all the things that I have are pretty chill things, just like funny inconsistencies or stuff that it doesn't make sense because we don't have enough information. It would have been cool to get more information so that the scenes would have feel like they fit a little bit better. But I still loved reading this book. Like I said, there's a review up there where it's a gush where I talk about all the things I love in this book, so be sure to check that out. I'm really excited to move on to book 7. Book 7 is the book that I've reread the least number of times, but I also I know I'm gonna have stuff to say in my Doesn't Make Sense video for that one because there are some things that I remember that I'm excited to re-explore. I love this series. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it so much as well. I'd love to continue chatting with this down in the comments. Are there some things that you hadn't noticed before? Are there things that you caught that I have missed? Let's chat more. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.